My name is Claire Whitaker. I'm 32 years old. And the first person who lied to me on my wedding day was my mother. She texted me at 3:11 p.m., 14 minutes, before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. Traffic is ridiculous, sweetheart, but we're almost there. To anyone else, it would have sounded loving. To me, it sounded rehearsed. I was standing in the bridal suite of a restored greenhouse in Asheville, North Carolina, staring at my reflection in a dress I had paid for myself, surrounded by women who loved me enough to show up early, steam veils, fix bobby pins, and smile every time they caught me checking the door. I had spent 18 months designing museum exhibits for other people's memories, and somehow still believed my own parents might help me create one worth keeping. I should have known better. My bouquet was already in my hands. The music had been delayed once. My fiancé was waiting under hanging lights and climbing jasmine. And all I could hear in my head was that message. Almost there. That phrase had followed me my entire life. Almost proud of you. Almost enough. Almost chosen. When the coordinator knocked and asked if we should delay the ceremony another 5 minutes, I smiled the way daughters do when they're trying not to fall apart in public. Of course. Let's wait. That was the moment I realized something I should have accepted years ago. If the happiest day of my life still depended on whether my parents showed up, then I had never really been free of them. I wasn't nervous about marrying Owen. I was nervous about stepping into the same old family script, just in a prettier dress. In my family, my sister Lauren was always the main event. I was the support staff. 2 years earlier, my parents threw her a wedding outside Charleston that looked like a magazine spread, white peonies, string quartet, custom monogrammed dance floor. They spent $160,000. My mom gave a 20-minute speech about how radiant and extraordinary she was. My dad toasted to the daughter who makes a family proud. I stood near the catering table while a server asked if I worked for the event team. That was almost funny. Almost. So when I got engaged, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't beg for excitement. I wouldn't build my wedding around hope that my parents would change. Owen and I paid for everything ourselves. We chose an intimate greenhouse ceremony. Every detail mattered. My mother called it Claire doing her little style. Meanwhile, she still reposted Lauren's wedding every year, calling it the gold standard. Every comment. Every question. Every comparison. Lauren did it better. But there's only so long you can live on emotional scraps before you recognize the pattern. The truth came from a valet. He told me my parents had already arrived. Relief hit me, brief and stupid. Then he continued. They sat in the car, asked for directions, and left for a barbecue. Not an emergency. Not an accident. A barbecue, paper plates, lawn chairs, a grill. They came to my wedding and chose something casual, replaceable, and completely optional instead. Then my phone buzzed again. Traffic is awful. Don't make a big deal if we miss the beginning. We'll come after. Don't make a big deal. That had always been the rule. Don't make a big deal when you're overlooked. Don't make a big deal when you're hurt. Don't make a big deal when you're second. So I stopped waiting. I walked down the aisle alone. And something unexpected happened. It didn't feel humiliating. It felt powerful. Because I was still there. And they weren't. When I reached Owen, he took my hands and whispered, "They don't get to touch this moment." And he was right. We got married. And during my vow, I added one line. I promise to build a home where nobody has to earn tenderness by being convenient. After the ceremony, we took family photos. Not by blood. By choice. I posted one picture with a caption. Some seats were empty. But love has a way of filling what disrespect abandons. The fallout started immediately. My sister texted, "Why are you being passive-aggressive? Mom is upset." I replied, "They chose a barbecue over my wedding. There's nothing passive about that." Later that night, they showed up. Late. Like they planned. Angry about their seating. I met them myself. They called it a misunderstanding. I called it what it was. A pattern. Then I told them something else. I had just withdrawn from managing their lake house renovation, the project they depended on me for. Since my milestones are optional, I said. So is my effort. For the first time in my life. I didn't explain. I didn't soften. I didn't apologize. I set a boundary. And I walked away. That night, they didn't miss my wedding. They lost access to me. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Kind of support I hadn't expected but deeply needed. When the photographer approached about family portraits, I didn't hesitate this time. Let's do them now, I said. Just, not by blood. He nodded, understanding more than I needed to explain. So we gathered the people who had shown up, not out of obligation, but out of care. Friends who had rearranged schedules, flown across states, stayed up late helping with details. People who had never once made me feel like I needed to compete for space in their lives. We stood together beneath ivy and soft lantern light, close enough that shoulders touched naturally, comfortably. And when I looked at that photo afterward, something inside me settled. Because it didn't feel like a replacement for anything. It felt like the truth. Like the version of family I had been quietly building for years without fully realizing it. Dinner came and went in a blur of warmth, soft music, shared stories, small moments that stitched themselves together into something steady and real. Owen's mother gave a toast that was simple but full of meaning. Naomi followed with one that somehow turned my walk down the aisle into something brave instead of something lacking. And I noticed, with a kind of quiet surprise, that I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology. Not for an explanation. Not for a sudden appearance that would somehow rewrite the day. I had moved forward without needing them to catch up. And that realization felt peaceful. Not triumphant, not bitter. Just calm. Like finally setting something down that I had been carrying for far too long. So when the coordinator approached later and said, "Your parents are here," I didn't feel the sharp panic I might have expected. I didn't feel the old reflex to fix things, to smooth it over, to make space for them no matter what it cost me. I just felt steady. Like I already knew how this part would go. I handed Owen my glass, lifted the edge of my dress slightly, and walked toward the side. It was a timing issue. These things happen. No, I repeated, quieter this time, they don't. Not like this. Not by accident. My mother's expression shifted then, the softness dropping just enough to reveal the irritation underneath. I think what's happening right now is that you're letting emotions take over on a very important day. And instead of enjoying your reception, you're creating unnecessary tension. That sentence, unnecessary tension, almost made me smile. Because it was so familiar. So practiced. So consistent with everything I had finally decided to stop accepting. I'm not creating tension, I said. I'm responding to it. My father took a step closer, lowering his voice. Are you seriously going to stand here and embarrass us over this? I tilted my head slightly. You mean the way you embarrassed me? By choosing a barbecue over your daughter walking down the aisle. That's not what happened, he snapped. It is exactly what happened. The air between us went still. For a second, I could see it. The moment where they realized this wasn't going to follow the usual script. I wasn't going to soften it. I wasn't going to redirect. I wasn't going to make it easier for them to walk away feeling justified. My mother tried again, switching tactics. Her voice lowered, softened, the way it used to when I was younger, and still responded to it. Claire, don't do this here. People are watching. We can talk about it later. Later. Always later. Later never came. No, I said. We're talking about it now. Because later is how this keeps happening. Her face hardened just slightly. My father looked past me toward the reception, then back at me. Fine. What do you want? An apology? Is that what this is about? I held his gaze. No. I wanted you to show up. That landed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But it landed. And for the first time, neither of them spoke immediately. Because there's nothing to argue with when the truth is that simple. My mother looked away. Between two worlds. I knew exactly where I belonged. My father exhaled sharply again, looking at me like he didn't recognize me. You've changed. I nodded once. Yes, I said. I have. My mother's voice softened one last time, but it didn't reach me the way it used to. Claire, we're your parents. I looked at her steadily. And today, I said, you chose not to act like it. That was it. No yelling. No scene. Just truth, spoken clearly enough that it couldn't be reshaped. I turned slightly, signaling to the coordinator. She'll have someone bring your coats, I added, without looking back at them again. My father started to say something, my name, sharp, almost commanding. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn. Because I had finally learned something that had taken me years to understand. Not every relationship deserves another explanation. Not every moment requires closure. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away while the door is still open and choose not to go back. When I stepped back into the reception, nothing had collapsed. That was the part one hadn't fully believed until I saw it with my own eyes. The music was still playing. People were still laughing. The lights still glowed warm against the glass walls of the greenhouse. My wedding hadn't been ruined. It had been clarified. Owen saw me immediately and crossed the room without hesitation. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need details. He just took my hand and searched my face for one thing, whether I was okay. And for the first time that day, the answer came easily. I am, I said. And I meant it. Not because everything was perfect. Not because it didn't hurt. But because I had finally chosen myself in a moment where I used to disappear. And that changes something. Not just for a day. Not just for a wedding. For everything that comes after. And that line, it wasn't just a promise to Owen. It was a quiet declaration to myself. A line drawn not in anger, but in clarity. Because for the first time, I understood that love wasn't supposed to feel like something you had to qualify for. It wasn't supposed to depend on how easy you made things for other people. It wasn't supposed to shrink every time someone else needed to feel bigger. As the ceremony ended and the applause rose around us, I realized something that felt almost disorienting in its simplicity. Nothing about this moment was incomplete. Not because everything had gone perfectly, but because the people who mattered had shown up, fully and intentionally. And maybe that had always been the real definition of family. Not who shared your name, but who chose your presence without hesitation. As Owen and I walked back down the aisle together, I felt the weight of something lifting, not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Enough to breathe differently. Enough to stop scanning the room for who was missing and start seeing who was actually there. Naomi caught my hand as we passed, squeezing it in a way that said more than words ever could. Owen's mother was crying openly, not out of pity, but pride. My colleagues smiled at me like they had witnessed something difficult and dignified all at once. And in that moment, I understood that being seen, truly seen, felt completely different from being tolerated. It didn't come with conditions. It didn't come with comparisons. It didn't come with quiet negotiations about worth. Cocktail hour unfolded gently, like the day was giving me space to settle into this new version of myself. Conversations flowed, laughter returned, glasses clinked. No one asked me the questions I had braced for. No one forced sympathy or tried to dissect what had happened. That silence wasn't avoidance, it was respect. It was people trusting me to hold my own story without turning it into spectacle. And that trust felt like another. First, my father cleared his throat, shifting his weight. Well, we're here now. I let out a small breath, not frustration, not anger. Just recognition. That doesn't fix it. Silence again. And then I said the part that mattered most. You don't get to come in now and act like you were part of this day. My mother's eyes snapped back to mine. Excuse me? You missed the ceremony. You missed the vows. You missed the part where being a parent actually means something. That is incredibly unfair, she said sharply. No, I replied, just a study. What's unfair is expecting me to pretend none of that matters. My father's voice dropped, colder now. So what are you saying? You're not going to let us sit? You're going to humiliate us in front of everyone. I shook my head once. I'm not humiliating you. I'm setting a boundary. The word boundary hit differently. You could see it. Because it wasn't something I had ever used with them before. My mother laughed lightly, but there was no humor in it. Claire, this is your wedding day. Why are you choosing to make it ugly? That question almost broke something in me, not because it hurt, but because of how completely it missed the point. I didn't make it ugly, I said. I made it honest. Another pause. Longer this time. Then my father said, You're really willing to do this? Over one mistake. I held his gaze. This isn't one mistake, I said. This is the pattern. Today is just the first time I'm not pretending it's something else. My mother's expression shifted again, less controlled now, more reactive. So what, you're just going to cut us off? Is that what this is? Punishment. No, I said quietly. It's a consequence. That word settled heavier than anything else I had said. Because consequences don't require anger. They just require clarity. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of music, laughter, glasses clinking, my wedding continuing without interruption. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel torn.